My name is Peter Doyle. I'm 82 years old. And I was born in Syracuse, New York. And I graduated from high school at Onondaga Valley Academy here in Syracuse.
And now that you know a little bit about the project, I'm sure you've talked to other veterans about their experience if they've already come here. What does it mean to you to be able to participate in this project?
Well, I find it very interesting, and I think it's nice that there are people interested in the Korean War. It's been some 60 years since I was over there.
Right. So hopefully you
So
can
this is
remember.
quite interesting.
Yeah. And what does it mean to you that we're interested in your experiences? Why is that important?
Well, some people may be interested in seeing basically the photographs or colored pictures that were taken over there at the time. It would give people a better idea how the life was there.
Do you think that not a lot of people know about what happened over there?
I think it is somewhat buried now, the Korean War history. Mostly when they go back a ways into history, recent history on wars, they mostly focus, I believe, on the Vietnam War, which is more recent.
But it's not. I mean, it's definitely more recent. But then again, a lot of people focus on World War II. Why do you think they kind of skip over from World War II to Vietnam?
Well, it was a much smaller war, not as a large scale like World War II. It was all right in one country.
But yeah, it was very important for the outcome of that particular country and the region as a whole.
Well, at the time, the big concern was a communist aggression, and we had to stop it, and that was about the first place that we were called to stop it was in Korea during 1950.
So let's discuss a little bit about before the war. What were you doing and why did you decide to enlist, or if you got drafted? Can you tell us a little bit about how you became a part of the military?
Well, before I was drafted, and that was September 1950 I was drafted. I was 22 years old at the time. From high school, and I graduated in 1946, I worked at Brazil Chevrolet in the parts department as a counter clerk, and I delivered parts also to the other auto shops in the area. And I left Brazil when I was drafted, Brazil Chevrolet Company, when I was drafted in 1950, pardon me.
That's interesting that you were 22 years old. I mean, a lot of the veterans that I've talked to were 17 or 18 years old, so you're a little bit older.
Yes. That was about the normal draft age, 22, 23, 24 years old.
I see. And this was into the Army, I assume?
Yes. Yeah, I was drafted into the Army.
So what was it like during training with the younger guys? Did they look up to you, or?
We were basically all about the same age. Only in basic training did I run across teenagers in the service. And they were in the National Guard. I trained at Fort Devens, Massachusetts. That was September 1950 to January 51. And it was a National Guard outfit from Tennessee, the 278th Infantry Regiment. And that's where we had our basic training. And they were young National Guard men.
And so from there, when did you actually ship out to Korea?
I shipped out in Korea in February 1951. That was from San Francisco.
Okay.
We spent about a week at, I don't recall the base right now. I should, but I don't.
Okay. So when you got drafted, the fighting had already started.
Yes.
And I assume you probably had an idea of why you got drafted and where you might be heading.
Yes, we had a good idea that we'd be headed for Korea.
And what was that like? Was it kind of a scary, man, I'm gonna have to go over there?
Some of the fellows would be worried about it, but generally we just went about our business in basic training, getting accustomed to the Army.
So it was kind of like,
I didn't personally sweat it that much.
so you got drafted and that's what you had to do.
Yes.
And when you shipped out in February to California and then off to Korea, was it getting a little more real? Was reality setting in, or were you still had that?
It was drawing a little bit more closer to reality as we were boarded on the boat. I was on the HASE, H-A-S-E, the troop ship, and it took us 2 weeks from San Francisco. That was Camp Stoneman, was where we were for a week there. And it took us a week, and we arrived at Yokohama Harbor. And we stayed out in the harbor overnight, and the next day they moved into the dock, and we disembarked, and buses took us to Camp Drake. It was only a few miles from Yokohama. And we collected more of our equipment at Camp Drake, and then we took, after 2 or 3 days there, we took a train ride south to the island of Kyushu, and that was Camp Mauer, I believe. It was up on top of the hill. At Sasebo, it was basically a World War II anyhow, a Japanese naval base. And we went through more processing at Sasebo on the island of Kyushu for about 4 or 5 days. We received more equipment, and then we took an overnight boat ride to Busan, Korea. And then from there, we got right on the trains and went north to Chichon. That was a distribution point where all of us were separated and went to different other divisions. Other than that, we were together pretty much all together from basic training up to that point. And that's where he split us up into 7th Infantry Regiment, or the 2nd Division, or the 2nd Division. I went to the 7th Division.
So there's a lot of moving around and processing.
Yes.
When did it actually hit you that you're going to be fighting? 'Cause it seems like, you're doing so much, it almost seems like...
Well, when we docked at Busan and boarded the train to go up north to Chichon for a further assignment, it finally hit home that this is as far as we go. We're here, and it sort of settled in that, wow.
We actually have to do this.
I know, and then we headed north to our frontline outfits. And on the way at night, you can see all these flashes, the artillery fire in the mountains.
So they're welcoming you.
Yes.
Some fireworks.
Yeah.
What was it like splitting up from your buddies that you came over with when you?
We pretty much were all in the same mood. We accepted it. We're here, and you just have a job to do.
Is it hard adjusting to, I guess, the new outfit or the new soldiers that you're going to be fighting with? Because my impression is that a lot of, the fighting, you're kind of depending on the guy next to you, and you might have a little more trust than someone that you've trained with.
Okay, well, the older timers there, they could climb those mountains very easily, and we never had real heavy physical training. And a lot of us dropped by the wayside for 2 or 3 days. It takes, we trail behind, maybe a couple hours behind all the old timers that were used to climbing those hills. But after about a week, your legs got stronger and your wind got better, and you could keep up with the regular guys. And we melded in quite well with the old timer veterans who had already been there.
Did they offer any advice?
Not too much, you just follow along and stick together. I don't recall a lot of mentoring to speak of.
So it's just more on-the-job training,
Yes.
if you will. And could you tell me about, your first experience on the line, what it was like, how you were feeling when you first set up camp and got stationed?
No, we just more or less went along with the situation and didn't, get too concerned about it. I mean, you didn't have any choice, just accept the way things are. Trying to recall other things, but as for myself, I was not actually with the rifle company. They were usually about 200 or 300 yards ahead of us, and I was in a heavy machine gun platoon, and we give supporting fire. And I carried ammunition up to the machine gun, and then we'd spread out and in a perimeter to protect our particular machine gun. But we were basically, my outfit, I was in a supporting role. At night, we would tie in with the riflemen. But generally, things went along pretty well as far as I was concerned for myself. We would get incoming artillery fire at times. That was pretty serious there.
Was there ever a moment where you were scared for your life or thinking, what am I doing here? Or were you always just trying to think to yourself, this is what I'm doing, and I just got to look
Well,
at it?
one time we got plastered pretty heavy by the enemy artillery fire, and that was on Old Baldy. That lasted for about 2 or 3 nights. But the first night was the worst. And it sort of scared the hell out of you.
Yeah.
But
It was the worst
that passed.
It was the worst because there was just so much fighting going back and forth.
In our particular spot, it wasn't too bad in the supporting role of the machine gun platoon. And we were right alongside the recoilless 75 millimeter rifles, who were also in a supporting role. We were supporting the ridges where the infantrymen were out in front of us. That would be about 200 or 300 yards out ahead. At night, we'd tie in, like I said before.
But the machine guns, from what I've heard, were a lot of times the target of the opposition because they're such a powerful weapon.
Yes, well, the infantry out ahead of us, the infantry platoons had light machine guns of the same caliber. That was 30 caliber. And they would be right with the riflemen. And the enemy would go for those positions, try to knock out that machine gun.
Okay. So, how long were you actually there for?
I was there for 9 months.
9 months. And did you have any impressions of Korea while you were there? The landscape or the civilians or the other Koreans that you might have met?
Until I went home, I saw quite a ways in back of the line at Shanshan. I saw a lot of the civilian population. But where we were on the front lines, we didn't see any villages at all for 9 months, basically.
Yeah.
We lived in the hills.
Yeah.
And we would live several miles behind the front line positions in the hills in a reserve area. There was a couple of periods where for 2 or 3 months, 2 months at least, we were in a reserve area. We were around the Watchone reservoir area for quite a while, in the summer of 1951.
Did you ever interact with Korean soldiers or foreign troops?
Not the Korean Rock Army, but we had young Korean soldiers mixed in with us. I don't know if all the divisions had Koreans mixed in with them, but the 7th Division did.
How was
and
that?
I was with the 17th Regiment. And there was, of a 9-man squad, there was about 2 or 3 Koreans in each 9-man squad.
And did you have communication problems, or was it okay?
We would sort of speak a bit like pidgin English, mix a little bit of Korean words, a little bit of Japanese words, in with the English words. Like somebody got killed, they would, Korean boy might say, he all time sleepo.
It's an
Instead of he got killed or he died. He all time sleepo.
He's sleeping. Yeah, I understand. And did you ever get a chance to interact with them when you were not fighting on downtime?
Yes, there was one Korean soldier. He was killed after I left, but he was a very nice boy. That was Jin Jong Man, and his nickname was Junebug. We had nicknames for the different Korean soldiers that were with us. And he wanted to learn English very, very badly. And so I would try to explain to him the different English words, like if that's a very big mountain, in Japanese it would be, oh, that's a Taksan mountain. That means big. But I would say, well, that in English that would mean big or very large. And I would try to explain the difference between the twos, T-O, T-W-O, and T-double-O. And I would try to throw those 3 words into sentences to make it clear the difference between the 2 or 3. And I do that with other English words. And he seemed to appreciate that.
So it's good that you had an opportunity to interact and learn from each other.
Yes.
Did that kind of help you go on in the war to think about other things and develop relationships with other people?
I didn't continue correspondence after I went back home with any of the Koreans.
But at least while you were there, it gave you an opportunity to
Oh, we
think about
mixed,
something
yes.
else.
But they, as a rule, which is understandable, they would gather among themselves. That was common language there, and
Of course.
they tended to, like anyone in a group, you stick to your own group as a rule. But they mixed in with us very well.
And so you said you interacted with some civilians afterwards.
No, yeah, I had their addresses, 1 or 2, but I didn't continue correspondence.
Okay.
While I did continue, he was still in the Army. What bothered Jin Jong Man is that you go home after 9 or 10 months, but we have to stay here all the time. And it sort of hit him a little hard that we would leave, in 9 months or so. But as I would say, this is your country. But we got along very well.
Did he feel like you guys were giving up on him or the country, or did he understand that that's just how the military works, that new people will...
I think they realized that we were there only for a short period, and we would have other soldiers replacing us as we left. So we were there always in their support.
So he must have still been grateful for the Americans.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. And after 9 months, you were shipped home?
Yes. Then I spent 3 more months in the Army, and then I was separated.
Were there any, looking back on your experience there, were there any situations that you can remember, you feel comfortable talking about, that were, maybe the toughest to cope with and go through?
Generally, not too bad. There's a few situations you just don't rather not talk about, things that happen.
How about the happiest time when you were there? I mean, maybe it was, a lot of veterans say it was when they're shipping home, or they found out they were shipping home, or maybe your relationship with the Korean soldier teaching them English. Were there any memories when you look back that kind of make you smile?
Oh yeah, there's certain good memories. We got along well. We clowned around together. It wasn't dead serious all the time. Generally, most of the guys kept pretty light attitude, a good attitude.
Well, I guess...
And we visited with the Koreans that were mixed in with us well, right up on the front lines.
So I guess you need something to take your mind off of the seriousness of battle a little bit. Do you know any?
We tended to joke quite a bit about it, so.
Do you remember any specific stories of when you guys were joking around or having a good time? Maybe during R&R?
Oh, mostly over there, I could remember one funny incident. We pitched our large squad tents. Squad tents carried 20 people, or I'll say slept 20 men. And we had several in our immediate area, these squad tents, and we had pitched them in rice paddies. It was in the wintertime, and the ground was frozen. Well, we had a thaw during the night,
Great.
and the tent stakes pulled up, and the tent fell off to one side. And we were staring up at the stars. And it happened to another tent next to us. And they thought we had pulled their tent stakes up. And they went and pulled another tent down because we thought we did pull their tent down on purpose. And it was just the rice paddies, ground softening up.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. So everyone thinks that they're getting a prank pulled on them. So
Yeah, they thought we pulled a bad one on them.
that's pretty funny. So how did it feel to actually ship home, to leave Korea?
It was a good feeling. Glad to leave.
Yeah,
You know.
going home.
Well, mostly in your mind was everybody had the same thought when they were rotating home. You made it back.
Did you have any correspondence with your family while you were over there?
Yes, my folks corresponded regularly. I always had mail call. And they'd send film for me for my camera, and also there were food packages.
Oh, great. So
And I'd split some of it up with some of the other guys. One time I got a nice cake, and I opened it up, and I thought that green line going through the chocolate cake was another frosting of some sort. And fortunately, a friend of mine says, "Don't eat that. It went bad."
That's probably mold, yeah.
Yeah, it was mold.
Yeah.
And I thought it was coloring.
That's funny. That might have put you out for a couple days.
Yeah, it would have done a number on me. Yeah.
So how did it feel to get those letters? You know, this little connection back home.
Oh, yeah. There was always a couple of guys, I think, that bothered them that they didn't get letters. But the way it goes, if you don't write yourself, you won't get letters as a rule. But most of the guys wrote back, and they were right there for mail call to get mail from back home.
That's great. And so
That was a big deal. Mail call was a great thing.
yeah, takes your mind off of.
Yeah, when we were right up on the front line positions, a company clerk would bring our mail up, and he'd have to come through artillery fire or mortar fire sometimes to bring the letters up to us. We would be up on top of the hill, and he'd be down there, nice and safe in his tent generally, the company clerk. But that's okay.
You can't tell the other side, stop firing, we have mail. Let us get our mail.
Yeah. Then they had the Korean laborers. Our mess sergeant and crew would cook up hot meals for us, and they put them in these thermos containers. And this would be a couple of miles in back of the lines. And the Korean laborers would carry these on their backpacks, these thermos packs full with food and coffee up the hill to us.
That's great.
And they had to brave this mortar and artillery fire,
Yeah,
and they had casualties.
I'm sure. What was that like, witnessing those casualties? Was it hard?
Not too bad. No.
So you're home, you arrive in the United States, and you said you have 3 more months of service before you were discharged?
Yes.
How's it, so when you finally got to see your family, how was that? A long time coming?
Oh, yeah, it was a very good feeling. But most of us, I think, adjusted quite well. Back home, worked out all right.
And you came back to the Syracuse area?
Yes. Went back to my same old job at Brazil Chevrolet Parts Department.
Yeah. It was there waiting for you?
Yes.
That's good. And I'm wondering how your experience in Korea impacted your life in the short term and, throughout your life afterwards. How did it change?
Mostly I could say that I kept in contact with some of the guys. Mostly Christmas cards. There'd probably be about 4 or 5 or 6 of the fellows that always sent Christmas cards back and forth. And it wasn't until about 20 years later we started getting together in the New York group. There was a friend of mine over from basic training, and he ended up over there in Korea too. We would have summer parties, a weekend party, beer and hot dogs, a lot of clams,
That's great.
cookout. Yeah. We did that for about 6, 7 years. We jumped from, we take turns putting a yard party on for a weekend cookout.
So it was a good opportunity to, did you guys reminisce on your experiences, or was it just kind of good to be with some familiar faces?
We didn't talk too much, a lot on the experiences. We'd bring, maybe set up some pictures that we had taken, put them on a board. We'd play music, some of the old time records back of that day, and while we're drinking our beer, and we'd play horseshoes. We'd love to do that.
Oh, yeah. Sounds like a good experience.
Yeah, pitching horseshoes and beer.
Do you still keep in touch with some of your buddies from back then?
There's a couple that I still keep in touch with. A lot of them passed on now.
Yeah. So, well, I guess that's, one of the reasons why we like to do this project is so we can hold on to that memory while we can and have it for our future generations and grandchildren and their grandchildren. How has your perspective on life changed since you've been back, and thinking back on how the war has kind of changed your view of the world?
Well, I think mostly it looks like wars are forever. There's been a lot since the Korean Wars, and they keep on going. And I guess they keep up and will keep on going.
Have you been back to Korea?
No, I have not.
No? Have you thought about it?
Not too much.
It's something that
They do have the Korean revisit tours,
right.
but I haven't had all that much interest in going back.
What do you think about how Korea's role in the world today, after the Korean War, and how far it's come in the past 60 years?
I think the best could use the phrase, "You came a long way, baby." They really made quite a comeback.
Yeah. And
Well, they're better than they ever were before.
Right.
They're very. I think it's wonderful the way the country, South Korea, has recovered.
In what way wonderful? Just the fact that they've developed economically and.
Yes, and they're one of the world's best economies.
And do you feel that your presence over there played a role in that, or the American presence at least?
I feel like I was glad to do my bit over there, and it's nice to see that the country has recovered the way it has.
Do you think that the two countries North and South Korea, will ever reunify?
No, that's hard one to figure out. They're pretty much a stubborn group up north.
Yeah, that's a sentiment that I've gotten from talking to a lot of veterans. How about, do you feel, when you think about the North Koreans and perhaps the Chinese were over there also in opposition of your forces, do you have any animosity towards them? Do you think some of these feelings that North Koreans are stubborn is because you were fighting them, or do you think that's kind of...
No, I don't have that much animosity against the Chinese. They're still a communist country. I think it's run pretty loosely on communism. Their economy is spread out throughout the world. But they still in many ways, are diehards in their beliefs. But I think things may get better as relationship-wise over there.
If there was some escalation over there again, and say you're 22 years old, would you enlist or no?
I don't know how my feelings would be. I was never much on enlisting. I didn't mind being drafted, but I didn't.
Necessarily.
Not that much of a volunteer, I guess.
Yeah. I feel the same way. So
I was glad, all I can say is I'm glad that I didn't flunk the physical exam to go in the Army. I did want to pass that. So it wasn't too hard to accept.
Well, you did, and I think you proved that you were physically fit to last over there.
Yeah.
So over the past 60 years, do you think about your experience over there a lot?
Not too much. I have a lot of other things that I'm involved in, so I don't think too much about over there.
Does your family ask about it at all, or have you had the opportunity to share your thoughts?
Oh, some experiences, but I didn't talk too much about my experiences with my family over there.
That's what those weekends were for with your old buddies?
Yeah, with your old buddies, somebody that was in the service, you would visit, talk about things, but not so much with family. Well, they have that term, it's the forgotten war. It sort of gets bypassed, but it still gets resurrected in the news every now and then.
How do you feel about that? That is called the forgotten war.
Well, it's not a nice term. I hate to see it become forgotten. A lot of us made our contribution for democracy over there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we've established that it was an extremely important war, not just for America, but for the war and for the world in general. And, you know, one of our missions is to, I guess, erase that term, forgotten war, so people understand it.
Well, for one thing, it was a United Nations war. So there's a lot of other nations that were involved, and they haven't forgotten being over there. At least the men from these different countries haven't forgotten.
So a couple veterans have mentioned when Bill Clinton called attention to the fact that it was this military police action and you know, mentioned, yes, indeed, it was a war. And a lot of veterans were proud of that because it was finally some recognition that they were receiving.
Well, I don't think it was just President Nixon that wanted to push the term police action. Most of the war veterans from Korea don't care much for that term. A war is a war, and that's what it was, Korean War.
Okay. So I'd like to end just by asking you if you could maybe provide a message or two or some words for future generations of grandchildren and students and people who are interested in the Korean War who will be looking at our project and the database and your interviews to get some insight on their experiences of the Korean War veterans, if you could maybe provide a message or two to them.
Well, I hope my photo collection that I have might throw some enlightenment on how life was over there in 1951. And that's about best I can say. They just don't have. I think it's nice that it doesn't become a forgotten war.
Well, hopefully we'll do our role well and not lose that term. Mr. Doyle, I appreciate you coming and talking to us.
Yes, sir.
It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank
Same
you for
here.
your service. Before we end this interview, we have something that we'd like to present you. This is the Ambassador for Peace Medal given by the government of South Korea, and it's provided through the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs and the Korean Veterans Association.
All right.
And as a token of their appreciation, they would like to present you with this medal.
Oh.
And it says Korean War Veteran Honor. If you wouldn't mind, I can place this around your neck.
Okay, sure. You want me to? I could hold that.
Sure.
Here.
It's yours, so.
It's all mine.
So you are not forgotten. You are being recognized, and hopefully you know that. And thank you very much for coming and talking to us. We appreciate
It
it.
was my pleasure. I appreciate being interviewed.
Great, great.